The letter shook in my hands as I sat in the Charleston County Courthouse, the air thick with the scent of paper, perfume, and polished wood. Across the aisle, my daughter Vanessa Cole, age 39, smoothed the lapel of her ivory jacket with that same composed grace she'd worn the night she vanished 15 years ago. I am Evelyn Cole, 64, and I've lived long enough to know that some moments arrive like thunder, the kind that splits your life into before and after. The envelope in my hands creased, faded. Its seal nearly worn away was that thunder. Inside lay a truth I'd carried for over a decade, waiting for the day the world would need to hear it. "Your Honor," her lawyer began, voice silky, trained to charm. "My client was deprived of her rightful connection to her children. She's seeking full custody and pursuing kidnapping charges against the defendant." The defendant. Her mother. The word tasted like rust and rain. I straightened my spine, ignoring the familiar ache at its base, the kind earned from too many nights spent in hospital chairs and too many mornings watching over boys who used to call for a mother that never came. I was the one who whispered, "Grandma's here, sweetheart. Grandma's here." Judge Alan Murray, an old man whose eyes held the exhaustion of decades spent dissecting human misery, leaned forward. "Mrs. Cole, you've had custody of these boys since they were 3 years old?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, though my voice trembled at the edges. Behind Vanessa, my grandsons sat in a row. Jacob, Liam, and Noah, all 17. Jacob's jaw was set in quiet defiance. Liam's hands were clasped tightly. Noah, the youngest by 12 minutes, kept his head bowed as if the floor might swallow him. They looked so grown, so heartbreakingly familiar, each one a reflection of the son-in-law we'd buried too soon. They didn't know about the envelope, I thought. "Not yet," the judge continued. "And during this time, their mother made no attempt at consistent contact?" "Twice," I answered. "Once when they were 8, she wanted money. Once when they were 12, she stayed 3 days, then disappeared again." Vanessa's head turned slightly, and for just a heartbeat, I saw it fear. Then her expression reset, polished, unbreakable. She was always good at pretending. Even as a child, she could lie without blinking. Her lawyer's voice softened, rehearsed sympathy dripping from every word. "Your Honor, my client suffered from severe postpartum depression and addiction. She required time to recover. None of that should strip her of parental rights. But recovery had never been what she sought. Escape was. Postpartum depression. As if that excused vanishing into the night and leaving 3 little boys behind, boys who cried themselves to sleep for months, who hid crackers under their beds because they feared hunger might come again, who froze at the sound of footsteps, praying it was their mother returning, not another goodbye in disguise. "Mrs. Cole?" Judge Alan Murray's voice pulled me back to the courtroom. "Do you have documentation of your guardianship?" This was the moment I had waited 15 years for. Slowly, I rose from the stiff wooden bench, my knees protesting the weight of time. "I do, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "But before that, I'd like to present something else." I walked toward the front of the courtroom, feeling Vanessa's gaze burn between my shoulder blades, the same cold, assessing stare she'd given me when she was 16 and decided she was smarter than the world. The courtroom seemed to shrink around me. My pulse thudded in my ears as I laid the envelope on the polished table. Its edges whispered against the wood, a small, almost fragile sound that somehow felt louder than the gavel. Judge Murray accepted it from me. "And what is this?" "Proof," I said softly, "of what a mother really is." He unsealed the flap and pulled out the first photograph. His expression shifted, curiosity giving way to something gentler. The boys on their first day of kindergarten, backpacks too big for their shoulders. Then a science fair snapshot, the 3 of them beaming beside a blue ribbon project. Then a picture after a first solo bike ride, arms tight around my neck, cheeks flushed with pride. But there was more, far more. Report cards, parent-teacher notes in my handwriting, medical forms listing me as guardian, permission slips signed with the same looping E I'd practiced as a girl. 15 years of proof that motherhood wasn't written in DNA, it was built in scraped knees, sleepless nights, and the quiet courage of showing up every single day. "Your Honor?" Vanessa's lawyer interjected sharply. "Childhood memorabilia doesn't determine a legal." "Sit down," Judge Murray said, his voice firm, the room falling silent again. He turned another page. A Christmas photo. The boys wearing matching pajamas, wrapping paper everywhere, me caught mid-laugh with a mug of cocoa in hand. Another photo, the boys on my late husband's shoulders before cancer took him 5 years ago. "Mrs. Cole," the judge asked quietly, "how long did you compile all this?" 15 years, I said. Every holiday, every school concert, every night they asked why she didn't call. Every Father's Day when they made cards for their grandfather instead because they needed someone to call Dad. A sound broke the hush, a small, choked sob. One of my grandsons. I couldn't tell which. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because if I looked at them now, the boys I'd raised and loved, I might forget the woman sitting across from me, the one who'd left them, was still my daughter. And that was a truth even the strongest mother could barely bear to hold. Judge Murray held up a photograph, and even from where I stood, I knew it instantly. The boys 10 years old standing in front of our tiny Christmas tree in my cramped Charleston apartment. They were wearing the matching flannel pajamas I'd sewn from old fabric scraps because money was tight. Their arms were wrapped around one another, faces glowing with that kind of joy only children untouched by bitterness can still summon. "Where were you when this was taken, Miss Cole?" the judge asked. Vanessa's posture stiffened. For the first time all morning, her polished composure cracked. "I was getting my life together," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You couldn't what?" Judge Murray's tone stayed calm, but steel threaded through it. "Send a card? Make a call? Show up for Christmas?" The silence that followed pressed against my ribs. "Mrs. Cole," he said, turning to me, "is there anything else in this envelope?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. The school records. Every document that ever needed a parent's signature, every emergency contact sheet, every permission slip for 15 years. He withdrew the stack, the soft shuffle of papers echoing louder than footsteps. I watched him scan the pages, each one a fragment of a life built quietly in the shadows of someone else's absence. My name, over and over again, filled the boxes labeled Mother divided by Guardian. My phone number, under emergency contact. My signature on every line, from field trip forms to medical authorizations. "And your daughter's name appears on these how often?" "Never, Your Honor. Not once." The courtroom grew so still I could hear the faint hiss of the radiator in the corner. Vanessa's lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but she shook her head, her face ghost pale. Judge Murray set the envelope down with deliberate care. "Mrs. Cole, one more question. Do your grandsons know what's in this envelope?" I met his eyes. "Not yet." "And why is that?" "Because some truths are too heavy for children to carry even when they're nearly grown. Because for 15 years, I tried to protect them from knowing that their mother didn't just leave, she erased herself. There isn't a single sheet of paper in any school office with her name on it. I wanted them to have a chance to know her without the weight of my judgment," I said. "But they're old enough now. They deserve the truth." The judge leaned back, fingertips pressed together. I could see the decision already forming in his eyes. Then Vanessa stood abruptly, the legs of her chair scraping against the tile. "I made mistakes," she cried, her voice breaking, "but they're still my children. I gave birth to them. I love them." I turned then, really looking at her, the daughter I'd carried, forgiven and lost. Tears streamed down her face, unguarded, unperformed. For the first time in 15 years, they looked real. And somehow, that hurt more than all the lies that came before. For a moment, she looked like the daughter I'd once raised, the girl who used to call me at 3 a.m, voice trembling with fear and hope. The young woman who swore she'd be the kind of mother she'd never had. But then I remembered the weight of 3 small bodies curled against me during thunderstorms, their faces pressed into my robe. The pride in their eyes when I clapped from the bleachers at their baseball games, the way they'd started calling me Mama Grandma when they were 5 because I was the only mother they'd ever truly known. "Love," I said softly, my voice barely carrying across the courtroom, "isn't a feeling, it's a choice you make every single day." Judge Alan Murray nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Cole, please step back." He turned toward the boys. "I need to speak with them." "Oh." My heart thudded so hard I thought I'd collapse right there on the worn courthouse floor. Jacob, Liam, and Noah rose together, 3 tall silhouettes against the dull oak benches, their father's dark eyes and stubborn jaw etched in every feature. Yet in their posture, the set of their shoulders, I saw something of myself, the quiet strength of people who've had to grow up holding others together. They approached the bench. Judge Murray leaned forward, his tone gentle. "Jacob, Liam, Noah, I know this is difficult, but I must ask you directly. Do you want to live with your mother?" The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Finally, Jacob, always the one to speak first, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we don't really know her." 6 words. 6 words that seemed to drain all the air from the room. I saw Vanessa flinch, her hand rising halfway to her face before dropping again. Her lawyer closed his eyes, lips tightening. But what Jacob said next would stay with me forever. "But we'd like the chance to try." The words echoed long after the courtroom echoed still, as I sat that night in my small Charleston apartment, setting 3 mugs of hot chocolate on the table, just like I had for 15 years. The sound of the cups against saucers filled the silence that used to hold laughter. Judge Murray had granted them a 2-week trial period time for Vanessa to reconnect, to prove something none of us could define. 2 weeks for my grandsons to decide whether to rebuild a bond that had never existed. "Grandma, you're shaking?" Liam said softly, his gentle nature so like his father's. He was right. The mug rattled faintly in my hand before I set it down. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "No, you're not," Noah said quietly, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. The youngest by 12 minutes, but always the most direct. A nervous habit he'd had since 3rd grade, pushing his glasses up every few seconds, like the world might fall apart if he didn't keep it steady. "You haven't been fine since court yesterday," Noah said quietly. They were all perched on my old beige couch, the one I'd bought secondhand when they were 5, the one they'd once declared the best fort material in the world. The cushions sagged now, the fabric worn thin where their knees had dug in through years of movie nights. A faint purple stain still marked the armrest from the day Liam spilled grape juice mid-Monopoly meltdown. I eased myself into my armchair, the one that faced the couch so I could keep them in view, as I always had. "Boys," I began carefully, "I want you to know that whatever you decide, I support you." The lie tasted bitter. Some lies are mercies in disguise. How could I tell them that the thought of Vanessa taking them away felt like dying? That I'd already cataloged every corner of this small Charleston apartment where their absence would echo the kitchen where their laughter lived, the hallway lined with drawings that said to Grandma, "She wants us to move to Seattle," Jacob said finally. "With her and her boyfriend." Boyfriend. The word landed like a pebble in still water, ripples spreading across my chest. Vanessa had mentioned him in court, an investment banker she'd been seeing for 8 months. 8 months. And that, apparently, was the foundation strong enough to rebuild a family. "She showed us pictures," Liam added. "The house has a pool." A pool. As if chlorinated water could wash away 15 years of abandonment. As if tile and sunlight could measure love. "And our own rooms," Noah said, though his voice carried no spark. "She said we could decorate them however we want." I nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "That sounds nice." Jacob leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Those same dark eyes that had once looked up at me from a hospital bed when he'd broken his arm. Now they were sharp, searching. "Grandma, why didn't you ever tell us everything?" He gestured toward the envelope sitting on the kitchen table, the same envelope Judge Murray had allowed me to take home, sealed again but heavier somehow. Inside was the truth, the kind that cuts through years like glass. I swallowed. "Because children shouldn't have to carry their parents' failures." "We're not children anymore," Liam said softly. He was right. Somewhere between teaching them algebra and parallel parking my ancient Honda Civic, they'd turned into men, taller than me now, voices deep, shoulders broad. But in my heart, they were still the 3-year-olds who clung to my legs and asked when Mama was coming home. "No," I said, finally meeting their eyes. "You're not." I stood and walked to the kitchen table. The envelope waited, its edges frayed, its truth patient. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, tracing the crease that had once held 15 years of silence. "Then I guess it's time," I whispered. "You should know everything." Inside were not just photographs and papers, but the weight of every choice I'd made, every sleepless night, every quiet victory that came at the cost of my own peace. "Your mother was 23 when you were born," I began, settling back into my chair. "You're almost that age now, Jacob." Their eyes were fixed on me, wide and silent. "Your father, God rest him, was deployed overseas then. She was alone with 3 babies, and my voice faltered, thin as thread. I failed her." The words cracked like glass under pressure. I'd never spoken them aloud, not even to myself. "What do you mean?" Noah asked, his voice tentative. "I was working 2 jobs," I said, Your grandfather had just been diagnosed with his first round of cancer, and the hospital bills were drowning us. When Vanessa called, crying, saying she couldn't do it anymore, I told her to be stronger. I told her motherhood meant sacrifice. I reached into the envelope and pulled out a photograph I'd never shown them before. Vanessa at 24, thin, hollow-eyed, her arms cradling 3 screaming toddlers. There was no color left in her face, no spark, only exhaustion, only despair. I should have seen she was drowning, I whispered. I should have gone to her, should have moved in, taken leave from work, anything. Instead, I gave advice from my kitchen while she was falling apart in hers. Liam wiped his nose on his sleeve. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, I agreed softly. It doesn't, but it explains it. Your mother didn't just abandon you, she abandoned the part of herself that was failing you. Some people face their pain, some run, she ran. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Liam's eyes glistened. Noah sat perfectly still, that stillness he always had when his heart was breaking but he didn't want to show it. Jacob's jaw clenched tight. So why come back now? Jacob asked, his voice steady but edged with anger. Why sue you for kidnapping? This was the question I'd prayed wouldn't come. I reached back into the envelope and pulled out a separate folder, thinner, colder, legal documents I'd received just last month. Your father had a life insurance policy, I said quietly. A substantial one. It was set up to release when you turned 18 with your mother listed as the beneficiary, since she was still your legal guardian on paper. The silence that followed was suffocating. She's only here for the money, Noah whispered. We don't know that, I murmured, though even I didn't believe it. Yes, we do. Jacob stood abruptly, pacing toward the window that overlooked the small brick courtyard where I'd once taught them to ride their bikes. It's not a coincidence, is it, Grandma? We turn 18 in 3 months. 3 months. The number hung between us like a clock ticking down. There's something else, I said finally, hating myself for what came next. She filed to have me declared an unfit guardian 6 months ago. She just waited until now to serve the papers. The envelope lay open on the table, no longer a symbol of proof, but of everything love could not protect. Why? Noah asked, though I could already see the answer dawning in his eyes. Because if I was declared unfit, I said quietly, your mother would automatically regain custody, and as your legal guardian, that would give her access to your father's insurance payout immediately, not when you turn 18. The words landed like stones. I could almost see the betrayal strike them, feel the air shift in the small living room. Whatever remnants of childhood belief had clung to them, the tiny, fragile hope that maybe she had come back for love vanished in an instant. Liam's face hardened first, his jaw tight, his voice flat. She never wanted us back. She wanted the money. We can't be certain of her motives, I offered, but even to my own ears it sounded weak. Stop protecting her, Jacob snapped, spinning toward me, anger flashing in his eyes. Then, softer, almost pleading, stop protecting us. We're not babies anymore, Grandma. We can handle the truth. He was right. They all were. But 15 years of instinct doesn't dissolve overnight. I'd built my entire life around shielding them from disappointment, from pain, from the truth that their mother's absence hadn't been an accident, but a choice. You're right, I whispered. I'm sorry. The fight drained from Jacob's face. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside my chair. His hands large now, steady closed over mine. Don't apologize for loving us, he said. And that undid me. The tears came silently, spilling down my cheeks as I finally let the years catch up to me, the exhaustion, the fear, the love so deep it sometimes hurt to breathe. 15 years of being mother, father, nurse, teacher, and anchor, all for these 3 boys who had grown into men before my eyes. Liam's voice broke through the quiet. What happens now? I wiped my eyes and straightened my shoulders. Now, I said softly, you decide. You have a choice to make, and whatever you choose, I'll respect it. Even if we choose her? Noah asked, his voice trembling. The question pierced straight through me, but I met his gaze and nodded. Even then, because that's what love really is, not keeping someone, but letting them go if that's what they need, even if it breaks you. The 3 of them exchanged looks, uncertain, solemn, far too grown for their years. We need some time, Jacob said finally. I nodded. Take all the time you need. They disappeared down the narrow hallway to their shared bedroom, the space I'd somehow fit 3 twin beds and 17 years of boyhood into. I could hear their voices, low and serious, on the other side of the wall. Boys turning into men, deciding their future without me. I sat alone in the quiet living room, surrounded by the fragments of our life-framed school photos, tattered report cards, the faint smell of laundry detergent and cocoa. My phone buzzed on the table. A new message lit the screen. Vanessa, the boys seemed upset when I dropped them off. Is everything okay? I stared at the words, the irony of them upset when she dropped them off. And for the first time in years, I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or simply turn off the phone. I hope you're not poisoning them against me. We need to talk before their decision. Can you meet me tomorrow? The text glowed on my phone screen, sharp and cold as the air that seeped through the cracked kitchen window. I stared at it for a long time, feeling something inside me harden a kind of clarity that wasn't anger but resolve. After 15 years of silence, after a custody hearing that drained my last savings, after she tried to take the boys I'd raised from diapers to diplomas, now Vanessa wanted to talk. I typed my reply slowly. Rosewood coffee. 4 p.m. Then I set the phone down and began to plan what I knew, deep down, would be my daughter's final lesson and her reckoning. The Rosewood Cafe had once been her favorite spot when she was 16, back when she still called me Mom instead of using my first name like a stranger. I chose it deliberately. I wanted her to sit in the place where she'd once laughed, dreamed, and believed in good things before greed and guilt had hardened her into someone I barely recognized. I arrived early, as I always did. The same corner booth was still there, the one where she used to do her homework while I worked double shifts at the diner across the street. I'd bought her milkshakes with tips that barely covered rent, thinking love could fill the gaps money couldn't. The irony wasn't lost on me now how I'd worked myself raw to give her a life she'd run from the second it got hard. At exactly 2 o'clock, Vanessa walked in. Her cream-colored coat looked expensive, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup practiced and polished. She'd always been beautiful, but now it was the kind of beauty that came with rehearsed smiles and hollow eyes. "Mom," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. The word sounded foreign on her tongue, like she was trying it on for size. "Vanessa," I replied evenly, studying her. At 38, she still looked young, but there were fine lines around her eyes that no concealer could hide. Regret, maybe, or just time collecting its dues. She ordered a skinny latte with oat milk, predictable, precise, performative, while I asked for black coffee. Some things never changed. The boys seemed confused, she began once the waitress left. I can tell you've been filling their heads with your version of events. Your version. As if there were two sides to abandonment. As if the truth was something flexible. I told them the facts, I said quietly. Nothing more. Facts can be presented in different ways, she countered, leaning forward. Her tone softened into that familiar manipulative rhythm she'd perfected as a teenager whenever she wanted something. You have to understand, I was sick after they were born. Postpartum depression is real, Mom. You couldn't call for 15 years? I cut in. The question landed between us like a blade. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since she'd walked in, she looked small, not like a woman in control, but like the frightened girl she'd once been. And for a fleeting moment, pity threatened to weaken me. But pity wasn't the same as forgiveness. And for a moment, I saw something raw flicker in Vanessa's eyes. Fear, maybe, or the dawning realization that her old tricks, the ones that had swayed lawyers and strangers, wouldn't work on me. Not anymore. I wanted to, she whispered, her voice trembling. But the longer I stayed away, the harder it got. How do you explain to 3 little boys that their mother just left? You don't explain, I said. You apologize. You come home. You do the work. I was building a life, she insisted. No, I said evenly. You were running away. My tone stayed calm, but inside, something cold and final settled into place, the kind of certainty that comes when you realize a wound won't ever heal cleanly. And now you're back, I continued, because the life you built is falling apart and you need funding to keep it standing. Color rose to her cheeks. That's not true. This isn't about money, isn't it? I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder I'd prepared that morning. Printouts, screenshots, court filings, the kind of paper trail that money leaves when it starts running out. I laid them across the table like tarot cards spelling out her future. Your boyfriend's investment firm is under federal investigation, I said, almost conversationally. His assets are frozen. You've been living in a house you can't afford on credit cards that are maxed out. Your car payments are 3 months overdue. Oh. Vanessa's eyes darted across the papers, her face growing paler by the second. How did you— I may be old, I said, tapping one document, but I'm not stupid. You filed for bankruptcy protection 2 months ago, the same week you had me served with custody papers. The cafe hummed around us, a strange normalcy surrounding our quiet war. The clink of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, the sound of other people's laughter, all of it felt distant, like the world had shifted into another frequency. Vanessa's untouched latte sat between us, the foam collapsing into beige nothingness. Even if that were true, she said, her voice stiffening, it doesn't change the fact that they're my children. I have rights. I almost laughed. Rights, I repeated, the word sour on my tongue. Tell me, Vanessa, what rights did they have? The right to a mother who showed up? The right to birthday cards? To know they were wanted? I made mistakes. No, I said, gathering the papers slowly and sliding them back into my purse. You made choices. Every day for 15 years you chose not to call, not to write, not to ask. I thought they were better off without me. No, I said quietly, meeting her eyes. You thought you were better off without them. And the accuracy of it hit her hard. Her facade cracked just enough to reveal the frightened, selfish girl still buried beneath all that polish. What do you want from me? She whispered. I want you to leave. I can't do that, she said, desperation seeping in. I need the insurance money. Yes, I said, leaning back, voice cool as the coffee between us. I know. I folded my hands and looked at her. Really looked at her. My daughter. My stranger. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to withdraw your custody petition. You're going to go back to Seattle and tell your boyfriend the money isn't coming, and you're going to leave my grandsons alone. If you believe some scars deserve to be seen before they heal, subscribe and follow me into the next chapter of this family's fight for redemption. And if I don't, this was the moment I'd been building toward the culmination of 2 sleepless nights spent researching, planning, preparing for war. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a different folder. This one was thicker, heavier, the kind that felt like evidence the moment you touched it. Then I'll destroy you. Vanessa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. With what? She sneered. You're a 64-year-old woman living in a studio apartment. What could you possibly? I didn't answer. I opened the folder and began laying out photographs and printouts across the table. Not the soft, faded family images I'd shown the judge, but a sharper set of truths, screenshots from social feeds, credit card statements, hotel receipts, everything obtained legally by the private investigator I'd hired with the last $1,000 I had left. This is you in Cabo last spring, I said, pointing to a photo of Vanessa on a yacht, champagne glass raised, hair blown by salt wind, laughter that didn't reach her eyes. Same week Marcus was in the hospital with pneumonia. I called every number I had for you. You never answered. Her face drained of color. That's not— This is your credit card statement from that trip, I went on, sliding a page forward. $15,000. Spa treatments, designer shopping, while I was working double shifts to cover his medical bills. Vanessa's hand hovered over the papers, fingers trembling. She looked suddenly very small in the booth, as if the expensive coat and the rehearsed poise couldn't armor her anymore. I flipped another sheet. And this, I said, is your marriage certificate to a man named Robert Hastings 3 years ago. She stared at the document like it might bite. Her voice broke. Apparently, you weren't merely dating this boyfriend, I said softly. You were married. Public records are funny that way, amazing what you find when you actually look. I spread more pages, bank notices, liens, the federal inquiry into Robert's firm. Your husband is under federal investigation. Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, the kind of charges that can land a person in prison. Now Vanessa was shaking, her hands flat on the table, eyes wild. What do you want? She whispered. I let out a breath that had no warmth left in it. I want you to understand something very clearly. My voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried across the room. Those boys have been my whole world for 15 years. I've sacrificed everything, my savings, my retirement, my health to give them stability. I will not let you waltz back into their lives and destroy them for money. She blinked, and for a second I saw the little girl she used to be, frightened, pleading. They said they wanted to try, I continued, my hands gathering the papers into a tidy stack. They said that because they are kind, because they hope. But you and I both know why you're here. I closed the folder with a crisp snap. You can't prove what I can't prove, Vanessa mouthed, voice thin with fury and fear both. You can't. I can prove everything, I said, and the conviction in my chest steadied my hand. Your financial collapse, your secret marriage, your absence from their lives until it became financially convenient to return. I have documentation of every lie you told in court. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, weary, small, and somehow impossibly fierce. Outside, the cafe hummed on. Inside, between the clink of cups and the soft barista chatter, the space between us felt like a courtroom. Vanessa's breath came shallow. The mask she'd worn for years had slipped, just enough to reveal the frightened girl beneath the glitter. You're insane, she said at last, but there was no certainty in it. Insanity is showing up 15 years late and suing for what you didn't raise, I replied. Now choose, be the mother they need, or leave and keep your money. Decide before they decide for themselves. She looked at me, really looked, and the recognition there or the absence of it was worse than any confession. You're not the same person who raised me, Vanessa said quietly. No, I agreed. That woman was too trusting, too forgiving, too willing to believe people could change. I rose from my seat, slipping the strap of my purse over my shoulder. The woman sitting across from you now was forged by 15 years of putting 3 children to bed every night while they asked why their mother didn't love them enough to stay. I do love them, she said, her voice small. Love isn't a feeling, Vanessa, I replied. Love is showing up. Love is sacrifice. Love is putting someone else's needs before your own, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I looked down at her, this stranger who shared my blood but none of my values. You don't know what love is. I turned to leave, but her voice caught me mid-stride. What if I fight you? What if I take this to trial? I turned back. Whatever she saw in my expression made her flinch and sink deeper into her chair. Then I'll take everything to the media, I said evenly. The abandoned children, the missing mother who came back for money, the criminal husband, the bankruptcy, all of it. And when your reputation collapses and your husband goes to prison, when you have nothing left, I'll make sure the boys know exactly what kind of person their mother really is. Her breath hitched. You wouldn't do that to them. Try me. I left the Rosewood Cafe, stepping into the crisp Charleston air. My hands were steady now, my purpose carved into stone. Behind me, Vanessa sat alone amid the wreckage of her lies. She'd had 15 years to prove she was a mother. Now she had 15 hours to prove she was smart enough to walk away. But as I drove home to my grandsons, I knew with a kind of cold certainty that only experience teaches that she wouldn't leave quietly. People like Vanessa never did. They always had to test the boundaries, to see how much they could take before the world finally told them no. Fortunately, I was ready for whatever came next. The call came at 6:47 a.m., jarring me from the first real sleep I'd had in weeks. I fumbled for the phone, my pulse already spiking the instinctive panic of 17 years as the emergency contact for 3 boys who'd never quite stopped needing me. Mrs. Cole? The voice was professional, clipped. This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Seattle Police Department. I'm calling about your daughter, Vanessa Hastings. The formal tone told me everything before she even continued. I sat up, bare feet touching the cold hardwood floor. What happened? I asked. She was arrested last night in connection with her husband's federal case wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on my dresser. Of course she was, I whispered. Outside, dawn was just beginning to touch the marshes. Somewhere in the house, I heard Jacob's alarm go off for school. Life, steady and unbroken, kept moving forward even as another piece of my daughter's world fell apart. She's asking for you to contact her attorney. I closed my eyes. What settled in my chest wasn't satisfaction, not even vindication, but inevitability, like watching a house crumble that had been built on sand from the start. Mrs. Cole? Are you there? Detective Sarah Martinez's voice was professional but gentle. "I'm here," I said, walking to the window. Below, the small courtyard stretched out in soft morning light, the same place where my grandsons had once chased each other with toy planes and laughter. The gardenia bushes I'd planted were blooming again, indifferent to the wreckage unfolding hundreds of miles away. "Detective," I said quietly, "I need you to understand something. My daughter and I are estranged. I have no intention of contacting her attorney or offering assistance of any kind." "Oh." There was a pause on the line, the faint sound of someone choosing their words carefully. "She said you'd say that," Martinez replied. "She asked me to tell you that she's willing to sign over custody papers in exchange for legal representation." The audacity was staggering. Even from a jail cell, Vanessa was still negotiating, still looking for angles, still treating motherhood like a currency she could trade. Custody, for her, had always been a transaction, something to claim when convenient, not a responsibility to carry. "Tell my daughter," I said slowly, "that I'll be in touch." I ended the call and sank into the silence of my apartment. Dust motes drifted through the sunlight, swirling in lazy patterns. Through the thin walls, I could hear my grandsons stirring the comforting rhythm of a house waking up. Jacob's careful footsteps as he started the coffee machine. Liam's humming in the shower, off-key but steady. Noah's familiar grumbling about calculus homework. They didn't know yet. In a few hours, the world would tell them through headlines, text messages, and social media notifications that their mother had been arrested. The mugshot would surface. The news anchors would say her name like it was a tragedy they hadn't caused. Their teachers would whisper, their classmates would stare. Pity always traveled faster than truth. I couldn't let them find out from a screen. "Boys," I called softly, tapping on their bedroom door. "Can you come out here? We need to talk." They emerged one by one, Jacob already dressed for school, Liam in pajama pants and an old t-shirt, Noah with his hair sticking up like he'd wrestled his pillow. One look at my face told them this wasn't about chores or curfews. "Sit down," I said gently. They settled on the couch, shoulder to shoulder, the way they always had three hearts moving as one. "Your mother was arrested last night," I said quietly. No build-up, no softening. Sometimes the kindest cut is the cleanest one. The silence that followed was heavy. I watched the flicker of emotion across their faces, shock, confusion, and then something that looked unsettlingly like relief. "For what?" Jacob asked, finally. "Financial crimes," I said. "Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy." Liam exhaled sharply. Noah rubbed his face with both hands. "So," Jacob said after a moment, his voice low, "she finally ran out of people to use." I sat down across from them, my hands folded neatly in my lap. "It's going to be in the news," I said quietly. "Your classmates will probably see it before you even get to school." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Liam was the first to find his voice. "Is she going to prison?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Probably." Noah adjusted his glasses, a gesture so familiar it made my chest tighten. "What happens to us?" "Nothing changes," I said firmly. "You're 17, almost adults. You have a home here for as long as you want it. You have college acceptance letters waiting, scholarships, plans. You have a future that has nothing to do with your mother's mistakes." Jacob leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "She wanted us to move to Seattle." "With her," Liam added bitterly. "She wanted the insurance money," Jacob corrected, his tone flat, unflinching. "We were just the key to getting it." I winced at the sharpness in his voice, not because he was wrong, but because no 17-year-old should ever have to be that perceptive. "I know this is hard," I began. "No," Jacob interrupted, standing abruptly. He paced to the window, hands clenched at his sides. "It's not hard, it's clarifying." He turned back to me, his expression steady. "She didn't want us 15 years ago, and she doesn't want us now. Everything else is just details." His brothers nodded, silent agreement passing between them, the unspoken bond of boys who'd learned early to rely on one another. I saw it then, in all three faces. Not grief, not anger, but peace. Grim, quiet peace. As if the question that had haunted them their whole lives, "Why wasn't I enough?" had finally been answered. "Grandma," Noah said softly, "what did you do?" The question startled me. "What do you mean?" Liam met my eyes. "You knew this was coming. Yesterday, when you left to meet her, you looked different. like you'd already made up your mind. I studied their faces, these young men who knew me better than anyone. They had their father's eyes, their grandfather's intuition. Of course they'd noticed. I gave her a choice, I said finally. Leave quietly or face the consequences of her own actions. And she didn't leave, Jacob said. No, I replied. She didn't. So you destroyed her. The words hung between us, not angry, not accusing, just observant. I waited for judgment, for disappointment. But instead, Noah smiled, a small, tired smile that somehow carried both understanding and sorrow. Good, he said quietly. No, sweetheart. Grandma, he interrupted, his voice firm now. She had 15 years to be our mother, 15 years to call, to visit, to care. Instead, she showed up when we were about to inherit money and tried to take us away from the only parent we've ever really had. He paused. You protected us. Again. Liam nodded slowly in agreement. Jacob looked at me, eyes sharp. How did you know about her husband? I hesitated, then decided they deserved nothing less than the truth. I hired a private investigator after the custody hearing, I said. I needed to understand why she really came back, and I found the answer. That must have been expensive, Jacob said, frowning slightly. It was my last $1,000, I admitted with a small shrug. Money well spent. The boys exchanged glances, that silent communication they'd perfected since childhood. It amazed me how effortlessly they did it, a language built on shared years and unspoken loyalty. Finally, Liam spoke for all of them. We're not going to school today. Boys, you can't just. We're staying home, Jacob interrupted firmly. Today's going to be hard enough without classmates and teachers whispering about our mother. We'll face it here together. Noah was already reaching for his phone. I'll call in sick for all of us. I opened my mouth to protest, to tell them that structure, routine, and normalcy were anchors in chaos, but the truth was, I needed them as much as they needed me. In a few hours, my phone would start ringing. Reporters, social workers, attorneys, and well-meaning neighbors who'd seen the news, facing that onslaught alone felt unbearable. Okay, I said finally. But if we're staying home, we're not spending the day in pity. We're going to do something productive. College applications, scholarship essays, planning your futures. Speaking of that, Jacob said, settling back into the couch, what happens when we turn 18? With the insurance money, I mean. I hesitated, the question I'd been dreading hanging in the air. It's yours, I said finally. All of it. Your father wanted you to have security for college, for your future, for a life he couldn't be here to give you himself. How much? Noah asked quietly. Enough, I said. Enough to attend any school that accepts you. Enough to start your adult lives without debt. Enough, I paused, my voice tightening, that your mother thought it was worth destroying our family to get her hands on it. The number $1.2 million, split 3 ways, burned in the back of my mind every time I thought of her. It was more money than I'd ever seen, and enough to buy opportunity or ruin depending on whose hands it fell into. She can't get it now, can she? Liam asked. I shook my head. No, her arrest makes it impossible for her to claim guardianship, and by the time her case is resolved, you'll all be adults. Your father's money will go exactly where he intended to you. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a real smile. It was small but genuine, a quiet triumph carved out of exhaustion. Then my phone rang. The screen showed a Seattle number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Cole? A smooth, professional male voice said. This is James Morrison, attorney for Vanessa Hastings. My client would like to discuss terms for signing over custody in exchange for... I hung up before he could finish. Her lawyer? Jacob asked. Yes. What did he want? Liam pressed. I looked at them, these remarkable young men who had weathered every storm life had thrown at them and still stood tall. She wants to trade you, I said quietly. She's offering to sign away her parental rights if I pay for her legal defense. The room fell silent, and in that silence, I felt something break, not in me, but in the fragile image they'd still carried of the woman who had given them life. The silence that followed was different this time, not hurt, not even surprised, but coldly angry. What are you going to tell him? Jacob asked, his voice measured. I walked to my desk and pulled open the drawer, taking out a document I'd had prepared weeks ago, a precaution I'd hoped I'd never need. A formal statement declining any financial responsibility for Vanessa's legal troubles, accompanied by a detailed accounting of every expense I'd incurred raising her children. "I'm going to tell him exactly what his client is worth to me," I said, reaching for my pen. Nothing. 6 months later, I stood in the corridor of the federal courthouse in Seattle, watching through reinforced glass as my daughter was led away in handcuffs. The orange jumpsuit made her look smaller somehow, like a reflection faded from too much light. The jury had taken less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 18 months to 3 years, the judge had ruled. With good behavior, she could be out in 15. By then, my grandsons would be college sophomores, building lives defined not by her absence, but by their own choices, the ones they made every single day. "Mrs. Cole!" A reporter's voice cut through the echoing hallway. A microphone appeared in front of me, its logo bright beneath the sterile courthouse lights. "How do you feel about your daughter's conviction?" I looked straight into the camera, thinking of the boys, now young men, back home in Charleston, probably watching this very broadcast from 3 different dorm rooms scattered across the country. "Justice," I said softly, "is rarely satisfying, but it's necessary." I walked away before they could ask another question. Outside, I climbed into my car, not the old Honda that had rattled through so many years of sacrifice, but a modest Subaru, dependable and sturdy. The boys had insisted on buying it for me. "Grandma," Jacob had said when he handed me the keys, "you've given us everything. Let us give you this." The drive back from Seattle took hours, enough time for reflection. The same kind of silence I'd once feared now felt like peace. When I reached home, the house was quiet but not empty. Their presence lingered in every room, in the framed photos on the mantel, the scuffed dining table marked by years of family dinners, the faint sound of their laughter echoing in memory. They called every Sunday, without fail. Liam was studying pre-med at Stanford, his steady hands and gentle patience perfectly suited to healing others. Noah had followed his passion for technology to MIT, where his professors said he could see systems the way others saw patterns in clouds. And Jacob, ever the leader, was at Northwestern, studying journalism with a focus on investigative reporting. "I want to expose the truth," he'd told me once. I'd smiled then, recognizing something fierce and familiar in his determination. He was, in every way that mattered, his grandmother's son. "Like you did with Mom." My phone rang just as I unlocked the apartment door. Jacob's name lit up the screen. "Grandma, we saw the news." "All of you?" "Liam called a conference," he said. "We're all here." I could hear voices in the background, laughter, the familiar overlapping rhythm of 3 brothers who had always been each other's anchor. My boys, together despite being scattered across the country. Modern technology had its mercies. "How are you feeling?" That was Liam, his tone as gentle as ever. "Relieved?" I said honestly. "Closure has a weight to it, one you don't realize you've been carrying until it's gone." "Oh, good." Noah's voice came next, firmer, steadier than I remembered. "She made her choices. Now she gets to live with them." There was a pause, a shared breath, and then Jacob spoke again. "Grandma, we have something to tell you. We've been planning this for weeks." My heart skipped. After raising 3 boys with a shared weakness for grand gestures, I'd learned to meet that sentence with equal parts anticipation and mild terror. "We're all flying home for Thanksgiving," Liam said. "But that's not the surprise." "We bought a house," Noah announced. "Well," Jacob corrected. "We made an offer. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, big backyard, and a real kitchen, enough space for all of us to cook together." I sank into my armchair, the same one that had survived years of spilled milk, late-night study sessions, and whispered confessions. "Boys, you can't just—" "It's in your name," Jacob interrupted. "Completely paid for. We used part of the inheritance. And before you argue, remember Dad's insurance was meant to secure our future." He paused. "Our future includes you, Grandma. It always has." The tears came before I could stop them, slipping down my cheeks in quiet, grateful surrender. "You can't just—" "We already did," Liam said softly. "The closing's next month. We'll all be home for winter break to move you in. But your education is covered," Noah said. "We planned this. Tuition, housing, everything. The house money's separate. We learned from you. I closed my eyes, breathing in the moment. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every meal skipped, so they could eat all of it had led here. They'd been watching all along. Besides, Jacob added with a grin in his voice, we'll need somewhere to bring our future wives to meet their grandmother-in-law. This apartment's way too small for that level of intimidation. I laughed through the tears, imagining it 3 young men, grown and grounded, bringing love home, continuing the cycle we'd built out of ashes and grit. There's something else, Liam said quietly after a beat. We've been talking, and we want to legally change our last name. My breath caught. To what? To yours, Jacob said. Cole. We want your name, Grandma, the one that raised us, the one that means home. The silence that followed carried the weight of 15 years, years of grief, rebuilding, and quiet triumph. They were honoring me in the most profound way imaginable, claiming me not just in spirit but in name as their mother, officially, as I had already been in their hearts. Are you sure? I whispered. Jacob smiled through the phone screen, his voice steady. We've never been more sure of anything, Grandma. You're our mother in every way that matters. It's time the paperwork caught up with reality. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of their words sink in. The completeness of that moment was almost too much to bear. Vanessa had lost everything, her freedom, her money, her reputation. But in losing it all, she had unwittingly given me the greatest gift: absolute certainty. The boys I'd raised, my boys, knew the difference between the woman who had given them life and the woman who had truly loved them. What about your father's name? I asked softly. Thompson was his family name. We'll hyphenate, Noah said. Thompson, Cole. We'll carry both legacies, Dad's love and your sacrifice. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, a place that finally felt like permanence. Sunlight streamed across granite countertops. The windows opened onto a small backyard where I was already planning a vegetable garden. The boys were home for winter break, and the house pulsed with laughter and the rhythmic noise of family, the kind that fills every quiet space with belonging. Jacob sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open, typing furiously. I'm working on an article, he told me, about grandparents raising their grandkids. It's more common than people think. What you did for us, millions are doing the same thing. Oh. Across the counter, Liam was teaching Noah how to make their grandfather's famous dumplings. The sight of them, heads bent close together, hands moving in sync, filled me with a happiness so deep it almost hurt. Continuity, tradition, love made tangible. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened the message. Please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need to try. The boys are my children too. Vanessa. Even now, the audacity of her timing stole my breath. I showed the message to Jacob, who read it with the same analytical calm he brought to his investigative work. What do you want to do? He asked. Nothing, I said, deleting the message. She had her chance to be their mother. She chose money instead. And us? Jacob asked quietly. What did we choose? I smiled, reaching across the table to pull him into a hug that somehow managed to include all 3 of my boys, my sons. Every year we had struggled, survived, and somehow flourished had led us to this moment. You chose love, I said softly. You chose family. You chose each other. That evening, as we sat around our new dining room table, our first real home, we shared steaming plates of homemade dumplings and stories that spilled into laughter. Liam talked about his medical school interviews. Noah described the tech startup that had offered him an internship, and Jacob debated the ethics of journalism and social justice with the kind of passion that made me both proud and terrified. I realized then that I was experiencing something I'd never truly known before: peace. Complete, unshakable peace. The woman who had once raised 3 abandoned toddlers in a cramped apartment on little more than hope had become something stronger, wiser, steadier, more certain of her place in the world. Vanessa had taught me one final lesson, though she'd never meant to. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give another person is the opportunity to discover their own strength. Her abandonment had forced me to become the mother she'd refused to be, the protector she'd never chosen to become, the foundation my grandsons had needed to build their remarkable lives. As I looked around the table at my sons, because that's what they were now, legally and completely I realized revenge had never been necessary. Vanessa's punishment wasn't prison or bankruptcy or public humiliation. It was this missing the laughter, the love, the life she could have had. She'd traded everything that mattered for money she'd never kept. And in doing so, she'd given me the greatest gift of all, the certainty that I was exactly the mother these boys had needed. Justice, I realized, isn't always punishment. Sometimes, it's choosing love when others choose selfishness, choosing to stay when others run. They were mine now, completely and forever, and I was theirs. That was justice enough. When I look back on everything, the trials, the choices, the love that survived it all, I realize I never did this alone. Every moment of courage came from believing that doing the right thing still matters, even when it costs you. If my story moved you, tell me what you think. Would you have made the same choices? Leave me a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe so we can keep walking through stories of strength and second chances together. And remember this: love isn't about perfection, it's about staying when others walk away. Choose love, always.